So welcome. We are so glad that you could join us today for this virtual launch of Structures of Kyoto, the fourth Writers in Kyoto anthology. I'm Lisa Wilcutt, and this is today's program. So we'll start with opening remarks by Rebecca Otowa, followed by a toast led by Karen Lee Tawarayama. And Rebecca and Karen are the editors extraordinaire, without whom this anthology would not have come into existence. And so we can just go ahead and thank them right away. Thank you, thank you. Then we'll hear from John Dougal. And I feel like I've skipped something. We have Rebecca, and then we have the toast from Karen. We have John Dougal. We have brief presentations from the contributors. Everyone will speak for about 3 minutes each in order of appearance in the book. And then we'll end by opening up the floor to discussions and some Q&A. So without further ado, I will turn things over to you, Rebecca.
Okay, now I'm not muted. Thanks everybody for coming today, and congratulations to all of us who have finally been able to have the Structures in Kyoto in our hand. I'd like to start with a few thanks. First of all, thanks to everybody who's come today, and also to Lisa, who I'm sure will do a wonderful moderating job as she always does. Thank you very much, Lisa. I'd like to thank Karen, my co-editor, who has a marvelous eye for detail and caught me up on many, many things that I would have missed otherwise. And she's just been an absolute rock the whole time, and we've become very good friends. I'd also like to thank Rick Elizaga for all of your marvelous work at the 11th hour to upload the print book and ebook to Amazon, and plenty of other things too numerous to mention that you pulled up irons out of the fire. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to thank John Dougal for believing in me enough to ask me to edit the anthology. I was very worried about it, especially because I'm not very digitally inclined. But thank goodness I had plenty of help in that regard. Thank you, John, for your constant encouragement. I'd also like to thank the past editors of the anthologies before this one, particularly Jan Williams, the anthology editor of, well, one of the anthology editors of number 3. She unfortunately couldn't be here today, but I really want to give her a vote of thanks for all the marvelous encouragement that she has provided to us during this time. Also, all the contributors, including those who couldn't be here today. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Robert Weiss, or Weiss, who can't be here because of, what's the word in English? Time difference, yeah, time difference, but who was the very first person to contribute well before the deadline. And I'm really very happy to thank him since he couldn't be here. And another person who couldn't be here is Stuart Eyre, who is a marvelous illustrator who has come to live in Kyoto in the past couple of years. And he did our cover, which, as you know, is the first anthology with color cover. And also he has several illustrations throughout the book. And I'm very pleased to be working with him. He's a wonderful guy and spectacular artist. I'd like to talk for just a couple of minutes about why I chose the theme Structures of Kyoto. It just popped into my head that the word structure has an incredibly broad scope and is offering an incredible potential for different writers to do different things. It's sufficiently broad and large in definition, and it's also, in a way, provides a good limit as well. As we know, the structures of Kyoto are many and varied. We have the physical structure, the mountains and rivers of Kyoto, upon which were superimposed the grid of streets and the wonderful old temples and shrines over the course of 1,000 years or more, which give Kyoto its special character. I'd also like to point out that upon these physical structures have been built the cultural, social, and psychological aspects of Kyoto. In some cases, they actually gave rise to the physical structures. For example, the culture of Zen gave us wonderful temples, including Nanzenji, which John Einerson has given us such a wonderful photograph essay about the Nanzenji gate. Also, there's calligraphy, there's poetry, there's the tea ceremony, there's festivals, there's hierarchies of amazing arts and crafts types families. And altogether, Kyoto just has so many structures, it would take hours and hours to list them all. So I'll stop now. The other one is, I thought that structures afforded a great deal of visual potential. I myself am a big fan of visual elements in a book. I think that illustrations and other things provide incredible rest to the eye and variety. And I think that our book has a lot of that element in it, and I'm very grateful for that. As an editor, and I think Karen will bear me out on this, the structure of the book itself is also one of the structures that turned out to be very important. At the end of last year, when we were deciding on the order for the contributions to be in, it flashed on me that it would be good to use a map of Kyoto to provide an order for those contributions. So the structure of the book ended up echoing the physical structure of Kyoto itself. We have the western side and eastern side of the Kamogawa. And I think that that worked quite well as a part 1 and part 2. And we also had a couple of other little things that weren't exactly tied to a location. And those things were placed in other parts of the book. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Mike Freiling, who provided translations of Hyakunin Isshu, the 100 poems, and he also introduced a marvelous illustrator, Karina Takata, who who are responsible for the pages that separate the various parts of the book, and I think that worked out really well. I also wanted to say that probably a lot of people, especially people who are used to editing and proofreading, if they flip through the book, they'll see quite a lot of different font sizes and spacing. We worked very hard to get the font sizes and spacing right in this book. I personally like the fact that there are different font sizes. One reason that we did that was so that, for example, poetry, the lines would appear on the page as the authors intended. The other reason I liked the differences in font sizes was that actually a font size difference can act almost like an illustration in that it allows the eyes to rest from the unrelieved print of the same size. If you suddenly have a smaller or larger font size, it allows the eyes to have a little rest from what it's been doing. I also want to say that the variety of contributions produced its own structure within the book. We have all kinds of prose, we have also all kinds of poetry, and I really enjoyed all the different contributions, including images, illustrations, and everything just came together really well. And I'd like to thank everybody for their encouragement. And finally, I just want to say that since this is number 4, we're well off and running with this anthology series. So please consider making a contribution to next time, or the time after that, or the time after that. And we hope that there will be many more such books, and it will be a wonderful addition to bookshelves around the world. So thank you very much.
Okay, so should I just step in with a toast now? Lisa, is that okay?
Yes, please. The floor is yours.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Karen, I forgot to introduce you.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Notes, everybody, so get your libations ready.
Yes. Okay, does everyone have their drink ready? I don't usually drink white wine during the day, but I'll make an exception this time. Okay, so I won't make everyone wait long. And thank you, Rebecca, for expressing our thanks to everyone. I certainly agree with everything you said. So again, very shortly, I just like to say thank you to the artists and the authors who contributed to the anthology, and to the editors of previous anthologies who helped us so much along the way. Especially to Writers in Kyoto chair and founder John Dougal, who made all of this possible in the first place. And especially to Rick Elizaga, our formatter. Yeah, thank you so much for everything you've done for us along the way. And especially to Rebecca, my co-editor. It's been wonderful working with you. Rebecca really, I really took on this role as co-editor because I wanted to learn about the process, and Rebecca was so open and helpful along the way, and we really had a good flow of ideas going. We could really get into the creative process. So yeah, thank you, Rebecca, very much. And may Writers in Kyoto prosper, and may we all continue to inspire each other. Kanpai.
Bye.
Okay, and Lisa, or John, may I turn it over to you?
Okay, thank you very much. So thanks to everybody for coming today. And three people in particular I want to thank, of course, is Karen and Rebecca. I'm not sure they were aware of all the problems and difficulties that they would encounter along the way. They had a few obstacles, I know, but I think they'll agree that it was all worth it because the end product is so good. I'm really proud of what you've achieved. And on behalf of Writers in Kyoto, let me officially say thank you for such a wonderful product and a contribution to Writers in Kyoto. And the third person I'd like to mention is Rick Elizaga, who came to our help with the formatting and got it on to Amazon in print and ebook form. So thank you to all three of them. Let's give them a virtual clap. Waving. Yes, everybody in unison. Lovely. What a lovely sound. Thank you. So Writers in Kyoto has been going for 6.5 years now. We've put on various events. We've had many speakers. We've had something like 60 different speakers, including some of the best writers about Japan, like Robert Whiting and Carol van Wolferen, and of course, Alex Kerr, who's joined us today. And we're very grateful to Alex for all his support. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Alex. We also run Facebook, website, and a competition run by Karen with astonishing efficiency. I'm really impressed by how she's got it down to a T. Excellent work, Karen, really impressive. And we have one of our competition sponsors, Robert Yellin, here. We're really grateful to Robert as well for his backing and for his prizes. Thank you, Robert. Now, one thing, the COVID crisis has trapped people in different parts of the world and caused untold suffering, but it's also been a boom and an alternative vision for a lot of people. And one of them has been the use of Zoom. And this is certainly true for Writers in Kyoto. We hadn't thought about doing virtual meetings at all until the COVID crisis. But now look how useful it is. We can have these global meetings on air. It's really been quite an asset, and I'm sure we're going to continue using it. When Writers in Kyoto started, I did actually think it was writers physically in Kyoto. And I did actually have 4 or 5 people meeting around an office chair, office table. And that was basically what I thought Writers in Kyoto would be. Now we have 71 members spread all around the world. It's a very different organization. And thanks to Zoom, we're able to bring everybody together in this community and to do social networking, which was one of the aims of the organization in the first place. So it's no longer writers physically in Kyoto, but it's writers whose hearts are in Kyoto. So in that respect, we can still claim to be writers in Kyoto. Now, as for my own contribution to the anthology, I'm very interested in the way that writers write and why they write. It's a strange way to spend one's life, in front of a desk on one's own, a solitary process. Why do we do it? In my case, I'm pretty sure it's a kind of therapy. And where do we do it? In my case, it's in coffee shops. And I wanted to share with the group why I write in coffee shops and why it's impossible for me to write at home where there are so many distractions. There's always something to clean, something to mend, something to do, which you would never have done otherwise, but suddenly when you're about to write, it becomes compellingly important. So these distractions, when I go into a coffee shop, I'm free of all that. I'm able to shut out the outside world and focus in on the only thing in front of me, which is a pen and paper. And while I was thinking about coffee shop and how writing in coffee shops, it led me to think naturally about literary associations of coffee shops, and 3 in particular. There are many more in Kyoto that I could have written about, but I wanted to pick up 3 that had a personal resonance for me. So if you're interested in which 3 they are, you'll have to read my piece in the anthology. And that's all I've got to say. Wonderful book. I really, really am impressed by the good quality. And I think we all have a duty to try and sell this book. We can buy our own copy, but we should buy another one and give it to a friend or family member, because it really deserves to be read more widely. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Right now, we would like to invite contributors to talk about their work in the anthology. So first up would be Judith Clancey, who wrote the lovely foreword describing her decades in Kyoto and the development of the writing community. But Judith is not able to join us today, but she has sent a message, which I have the privilege of sharing, as follows. Please convey my congratulations to everyone who participated in the anthology, with special thanks to the editors for doing an excellent job, and to the others for making Kyoto a more interesting place by adding all their perspectives. We are fortunate to have a forum such as this anthology, which allows us, temporary residents, to express our layers of affection for our attraction to this city, its beauty, its idiosyncrasies, and its artistic muse. It's also a lot of fun to live here. So thank you, Judith. I should mention right now that there are 5 other contributors who are not able to join us live today. And although we don't have messages from each of them, I will read their names and the titles of their contributions as we work our way through the book, and that will perhaps sort of conjure their spirits to be here with us today. So the first 2 pieces in the book following the foreword are just such pieces. The first one is by Rona Conti, who is not here with us. Her piece is titled, "What Does This Say, Sensei?" And followed by that is Brenda Yates with Interlude Kyoto, which was the 3rd prize winner of the 2020 Writers in Kyoto Writing Competition. And next up, live here with us today is Mark Hove. Thanks, Mark, for being here. So his piece is Rocks, Gravel, and a Bit of Moss. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And again, how wonderful, to echo John's sentiments, that Zoom has provided this mosaic opportunity to launch our wonderful Structures of Kyoto Anthology 4. In fact, I just thought as we were clapping Perhaps there's a new koan that could be inspired. After all, the sound of one hand clapping is rather old. So what is the sound of two hands clapping while on mute on Zoom? So, but that's just a starting point, because I have 3 questions to introduce my piece in the anthology. The first is, which structure in Kyoto has inspired renowned 20th century artists as varied as John Cage, the composer, and David Hockney, the painter? Second question, what is the second most photographed garden in the world after Versailles? The third question is, how has this medieval structure become so symbolic or synonymous with Japanese culture? And these were all questions that I was curious about and was a starting point for my piece, Rocks, Gravel, and a Bit of Moss. And so, ladies and gentlemen and WIC members, I give you Roanji Garden. So with this structure, I'd like to know, what is it about this patch of gravel, the size of a tennis court, that has a few rocks, gravel, and a bit of moss? How has it captured the imagination of the world? Well, I think that at first, this garden, if we can call it a garden, in fact, temple priests call it a knot garden. So it's already becoming a koan. So the first place to start is to do what everybody does, every visitor. And I challenge you and myself to admit that when we came to this garden for the first time, what we did was this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Wait a minute. There's supposed to be 15 stones here. Where's the 15th stone? We can't see it. What is the meaning of this garden? We cannot see the 15th stone. Oh, after we become enlightened, then we'll be able to see the 15th stone. Oh, okay. All right, so let's take a photo. And let's go on to the next garden. Isn't the next one Kinkakuchi? So it's curious. It's really curious. And what I think this structure really is emblematic of is Kyoto's invitation to see things differently and actually to forge new ways of seeing that are deeper or more lateral than our usual way of seeing. And that's what my piece is about. This piece of abstract art invites us, or it challenges our structures of perception. And there are a few tools that are to be found in Japanese aesthetics to give us a clue as to how we might restructure this experience. So with this kind of curiosity and sense of paradox, I invite you to go and sit, first read my piece, and then go and sit and just experience being in a Japanese stone garden. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. So the next contributor to the book is Amanda Huggins, who is not able to be with us today. Her piece is Sparrow Steps, and it won the second prize in the 2020 Writers in Kyoto Writing Competition. Followed by that is Rebecca Otowa with her Structures of Tea. Rebecca.
Sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong icon. Yes, I wrote a piece about the tea ceremony because I wasn't really going to contribute, but I felt that it was very important to include something about tea in the anthology about Kyoto because my own history of Kyoto is very, very much bound up with tea. I was in the Urasenke foreigners class for 6 years and have been studying tea since I was a university student and only recently stopped because, you know, the knees. And I just think that it's a perfect example of a very eclectic form of Japanese art in that it includes so many other disciplines in it. It's kind of like opera in that way. If you want to study opera, you can study singing, you can study music, you can study drama, costuming, sets, all these different things. And the same thing with the tea ceremony. You end up needing to know a lot about flowers, pottery, architecture, fabrics, and many other disciplines as well. So I think of tea as being a sort of a catch-all in a way for many different types of cultural manifestations in Kyoto. The other thing I like about tea is that it is a dynamic art. It's not just something that you sit and look at. It moves through time. It's a combination of space and time, which is incredibly interesting to me, especially when you see it done by somebody who knows what they're doing, which is, to tell the truth, a rather rare occurrence. If you are in a tea class, the vast majority, this is in my experience, the vast majority of people are wondering what the hell to do next. What dogu do I pick up next? What do I do? I forgot. You know, that kind of vibe is very common until you get to a certain stage. And in my piece, I likened it to learning a musical instrument. You start off with the technical stuff. You have to, you know, learn it by heart, all the different steps and what to do with this and what to do with that. And then you get to a different stage where you can do it, and you do it and you think, wow, isn't this great? I'm doing this. But there's another stage after that, which is the stage where you have to throw yourself away and you have to become the entire environment of a person doing tea, plus the guest, plus the environment where you're doing it. And you have to be less interested in the ego trip of being able to do it. And you have to get to a higher plane. And in that sense, I think that the tea ceremony is an incredibly important structure of Kyoto, and that's why I decided to write this particular little, I guess it's called Reminiscence of Studying Tea in Kyoto. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rebecca. So next up is Felicity Tilik with The River. Felicity.
Well, if I'd known that Mark was going to bring props, I might have thought about what I could have brought, but trickier for my one. So I wrote about Horikawa. I was thinking when I was trying to find an idea for it, how Kyoto is very famous for its rivers, but Horikawa is still one that is perhaps not as well known. But I am also pretty new to Kyoto. I've only been here, this is the beginning of my 5th year. And Horikawa was one of the first places that I really got to know in Kyoto. It's right across the road from my school where I work. And the very first week of school, we took the kids down on a Friday, and it was a beautiful day. It was sunny, and the kids had these plastic boats that they'd made all week, and they sailed them in a regatta contest, which I think a 4-year-old won. She didn't really understand at the time, but we were all like happy for her. And that memory really stuck with me because it was the first time I really felt comfortable, part of a community, because I was so new and I just really moved to Kyoto. And Horikawa became a place which I visited often. We would go to Horikawa after work to kind of decompress from our week. In summer, it's a great place just to sit and be cool. There's a lot of families nearby who go swimming there. It has a lot of seasonality to it. In spring, it has beautiful cherry blossoms, and in autumn, all the leaves change. So there's seasons even within the river. And pre-COVID, it was also a little bit of an escape even from tourists. It seemed to have been a bit of an unknown spot in Kyoto still. And I think that's because even though Horikawa is quite an old part of Kyoto, it's been in Kyoto since the beginning, basically. It's also, in a sense, a new part of Kyoto because it was buried for such a long time. And then they uncovered it and built it as it is now in, I think, about 2009. So there are people who have visited Kyoto many times who've never seen Horikawa. So yeah, it's a special space for me, and I think it's a beautiful part of Kyoto. And I hoped that more people could visit it, appreciate it. And so please read the book to find out more.
Thanks, Felicity. I think we've all just jotted down on our notes of things to do and places to go to make sure we don't miss that. So the next piece in the book is by Mike Freiling, and it's The Streets of Miyako. Mike.
Yeah, well, I want to start by saying thank you to two people. One is Karina Takata, who helped illustrate the pictures from the Hyakunin issue. She couldn't be here today. There's some sort of a Jizo festival going on in her neighborhood, and she elected to take her 3 little kids there. So appropriate allocation of priorities, I'd say. The other person I really want to thank a lot is Rebecca Otowa herself. She came up with the idea of incorporating these translations, and these I originally drafted these back in 1978, that fateful year, which was my first year in Kyoto. And at that time, there were a lot of things I didn't know. I really didn't understand the meaning of the word misogi, for instance. I had some of the geography confused, and I had a kind of a post-adolescent fascination with shock value, especially when it comes to, say, Shonagon's poem. Rebecca helped me work through all that, get some of the nuances correct, clean up, say, Shonagon's poem so it was suitable for a family show. And then we got into this discussion about, well, it'd be nice if we had some illustrations. So we tried to find a set of, there's that New Year's game with the Hyakunin Issue cards where you have both halves and you get one half, you try to guess the other half. So we tried to find a set of those illustrations that was not, wouldn't require license fees, and we couldn't come up with that. And then we sort of hit on, well, why don't I see if I can ask Karina to illustrate these? And Karina stepped up to the plate, did the illustrations that are in the book, and she and I have gotten so excited about this that we're actually going to, we're actually in the middle of moving forward to illustrate all 100 of the poems. And our ambition knows no bounds. We're even considering the idea of doing an English version of the card game with her illustrations and the poems in English, but we'll see if we ever pull that off or not. So I'm gonna just read one of them to you. This is by, turn on my light here so I can actually read it. Tei Shinko, and the poem goes, if you have a heart, you maple leaves of Ogura, prolong your stay upon the peaks. Please wait, the emperor is coming. And I really like that poem a lot. It's got a, it talks about the maple leaves having a heart, but that poem has a lot of heart and a lot of devotion in it, and I just really like it. Now the other part of the contributions has to do with the streets of Miyako. It's a collection of poems that I've written at various points. I didn't look to see whether I ended up on the east side or the west side, because really I was sort of wandering all over like Leopold Bloom or Stephen Dedalus or something like that, running into myself from time to time. So I'm going to read a couple, just a couple. One is a poem I wrote at the grave of Lady Murasaki. I kind of ran into her grave completely by accident. I just happened to be walking down Kyoto one day, and I found a map and said, oh, Lady Murasaki is buried here. And I thought, wow, this is great. I've never seen another foreigner there. It's kind of like one of those, as I'm fond of saying, it's not a World Heritage Site, thank God. And so I have seen a few Japanese people come in, and it's a very special place, I can tell, to a lot of people. And I think it's a special place, not just to people. And that forms the material for this first poem written at her grave. Alpha Raven comes to call. His reasons are the same, I wonder. And then wandering over to the other side of Kyoto, the next short poem I'll read was one I wrote at Tatsugaku no Michi, just in the first days of spring. Fat white bird nibbles early berries, branch bowing under weight. And then I'll just close with the third one. This is, nobody asked me, Rebecca did not ask me where in the world Gulf Road is. Gulf Road is actually the street that my apartment's on in the Yamashina area. And it's called Gulf Road because there used to be a golf course or a driving range or something around there. But, you know, if you ask the taxi driver, take me to Gulf Road, they understand where Gulf Road is. Funny name for a street in Kyoto, but I witnessed a scene once that I know you've all seen over and over and over again in Kyoto. And to me, it's just a heartwarming, it's one of those things that makes Kyoto, Kyoto to me. Parting mothers voice a crescendo of bye-byes and matanes. So, thank you very much. I'll turn it over to whoever's next.
Thanks, Mike. So up next in the book is John Dougal, who's already shared his thoughts with us and those piqued our interest about finding some new cafes. And so following that is Ina Sanjana with Sunrise Over the Kamogawa, which took second prize in the 2019 Writers in Kyoto Writing Competition.
Oh, hi, can you hear me okay? Hi, everyone, I'm Ina, it's nice to meet you. I'm joining you from Kyoto today on this nice sunny day. So firstly, thank you for your hard work in putting the anthology together. I know it's a lot more work than people might expect.
Ina, you have to speak a little louder.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay now? Yep.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you everyone for your hard work. So my piece, I think it's relatively self-explanatory. It's about someone who doesn't have shelter for the night, so they're sleeping by the riverbank. So as for why I wrote it, whenever we have bad weather in Japan, especially like the last couple of weeks with the heavy rain, I always worry about people who don't have adequate shelter. And another reason is, well, now I'm working for a company, but before I was a student at the Kyoto University, and I used to work in a restaurant as a waitress on Kiyamachi. And we had quite a lot of foreign tourists. And one remark that I heard more than once is that there are no homeless people in Japan, which made me think a little, because also I see some news articles about the government deliberately moving homeless people along for the sake of aesthetics. And I think in general in my writing, I'm drawn to things that people choose not to record, let's say, to exclude from their Instagram pictures of Kyoto. And I think those things really show you the character of a place more than the nice pictures of the temples and so on. And so I just wanted to highlight a side of Kyoto that perhaps people who only visit here a short time would never have thought about. That's about it. But if you have any questions, please let me know now or later. And thank you very much for your invitation.
Thank you so much. All right, the next piece in the book is by one of our editors, Karen Tawarayama, and her
Okay.
piece is The Life Dispensary. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So my story takes place in the future, in the year 2050, and involves the mythological creature, the kappa. And this one is named Itaro. And the kappa is, of course, a small, scaly creature who has a tortoise-like shell on his back and a kind of dish on his head that holds this liquid that gives it power. And if the liquid spills or gets dried up, they become powerless, and they exist in the rivers and the ponds, and they love cucumbers, and they're known to be kind of aggressive towards humans, but at the same time, very polite, kind of obsessed with politeness. So I had this image of the future, especially in the midst of climate change, and how this mythological creature would survive as all these changes were going on. So this character Itaro is attempting to survive as the humans in the community are trying to survive themselves. So in the story, they're kind of slowly taking over the habitat of the rivers and the waterways to be cool because it's getting really hot. So it's talking about what he needs to do to survive. So the kappa are shown in art in many different ways. Sometimes they're really scary looking. Sometimes they're, I don't know, sometimes they're just not really pretty at all. The character in my story, Itaro, is, I envisioned him as kind of older and a little bit grumpy, but he's really just kind of exasperated and frustrated because he doesn't know what to do. The illustrator for this story, Sharon Sandberg-Kerr, is here today, and I'll ask her to speak for a few minutes afterwards, but I just really, really love how she drew Itaro in the book, and I'll just show you really quick for those who haven't seen yet. So this is Itaro, and I wanted to depict the real structures around him in Kyoto. So he appears in the Dragonfly Pond inside the Imperial Palace grounds. I don't know if any of you have been there. It's not open very much. But to get away from the river where all the humans are, he goes to the Dragonfly Pond. Sometimes he goes to Kujo Pond. This picture shows him in a wooden bucket outside the Some no Mizu, which is at Nashinoki Shrine outside the Imperial Palace grounds. And that's a place I often go to collect drinking water. And in the story, he also goes to the hospital to get a cure for his he keeps losing this liquid. So that's what the story is about. So I hope you'll be able to read it to see what happens there. And Sharon, would you like to say a little bit about your process of, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm off mute, right?
Oh, you're off, yeah.
Yeah, I first just want to thank Karen for inviting me to be part of this. It was like the highlight of the pandemic lockdown for me. And in this sort of very isolated, vacant time, suddenly I had something creative to do that was a challenge and took me far away from my comfort zone, which is really color and paint. And I loved doing this. I loved working with Karen on it. Like Karen, I appreciate my friend Mary's tech skills that without them, my illustration would never have gotten out of Michigan, I fear. But yeah, it was a creative high to discover who Itaro was and what a kappa was, and to try to get him into a bucket. It was the right size and the right shape of bucket, and yet still sees part of him. Because Karen will remember there were a lot of itaros in buckets where they were more like wash basins. So, but it was really a gift, Karen, to have something creative to do and a challenge during this very strange time.
And can I mention, Sharon? So, you know, we didn't have a scanner to send the images.
Oh, yeah.
So Sharon's friend Mary came to her apartment in the height of the pandemic with this kind of high-tech camera. And you met in the lobby of the apartment, and she took the pictures and then sent them over to me. Yeah, so it was a really big process. Yeah, thank you, Sharon, so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, she was living, actually, she lives out in the country and was living very isolated. And I was pretty isolated alone in my apartment. So actually, I guess that was also the gift of a social moment, you know, but it was scary, but it was fun to do. I'm glad I did it.
Thank you. Oh, and I thank you, Sharon. And I wanted to mention one more thing too. So a lot of my writing is inspired by people that I interview in the community. So in one line of the book, talks about how the last person to go from the area, like from the kind of like the previous generation, was a horticulturalist who always sat on her bucket tending her flowers. And that is a real person in the neighborhood who I interviewed, and she lives in kind of this traditional house that had a tea house before. And about 2 years ago, the owner of the property insisted on selling the tea house portion and sold it to a kind of a very rich patissier in Kobe, who broke down the tea house, broke down her front gate with all these roses, and built this kind of huge structure that they never come to. It's just kind of sitting there now, but the main house is now kind of dwarfed, and it's the last kind of traditional house in that area. And she told me the landlord wants to push me out, but I'm not going. I have to die before they leave. So the inspiration kind of came from her, that she's being pushed out by these outside forces. So yeah, that's where it came from. Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Karen and Sharon. That story just got deeper and deeper, didn't it, as it went? So the next piece in the book is by Robert Weiss, who, as Rebecca mentioned, he's not here with us today because of the extreme time difference. And his piece is Converging Waters, Kamogawa Delta Blues. And the next piece after that is by Reggie Paul, The Magic of the Training Structures of Zen and Kyoto.
Reggie, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay, technology. Okay, so in this chapter, I write about how training in Japan happens through structures, through rules, through forms, and the repetition of the forms. These structures are the training basis of education, social life, and the traditional ways of Japan. Kyoto has some of the highest levels of these structures. In Kyoto, social rules are followed very strictly, and many of the traditional ways have strong Kyoto influences, like the way of archery, the way of swordsmanship, the way of tea, the way of Zen, and others. I write that these days, many people, when they look at these structures, they only see limitation and stiffness. They don't see what positively develops through these structures. They don't see the magic of the structures. Rote learning is an example in education. Now it is often seen only as a way of learning that limits creativity. So these old ways are losing their popularity. I explain how, in function, the traditional structures limit our interaction with the world. The purpose is to enable a student to concentrate, to focus on what it is they are studying. In truth, we all live within structure, tied to our bodies and the world. And at the same time, we all long for freedom while alive. I explain how, similarly, the purpose of studying within these structures is to learn something so well that it becomes a dance, so that you can do it full of energy and full of expressiveness. This is the magic of the structure. Thus, within a structure, the student realizes structurelessness or freedom. My Zen teacher once told me that Zen practice is like tying yourself up with a rope, and then in that condition, finding your freedom. Right how attention is the basic psychological function that is trained. What is cultivated in this style of training is free attention, attention that is not caught by anything. The example comes from swordsmanship, where it is said that if your attention is caught by your fear of death, then you will lose the fight. You can only win if you have free attention. In Zen, a monk trains in a monastery within strict structures. The purpose is the realization of their true self, called Satori, which is actually structurelessness. Then in Rinzai Zen, which is based in Kyoto, after Satori comes post-Satori practice, where the monk is sent out of the monastery into the world to ripen the realization, their Satori. The forms are cast off and the monk is freed of the structure. Through living in the world, Satori permeates the whole body-mind. In this chapter, I write about how the training aspects of these traditional structures appear in Kyoto. Strictness of Kyoto, purpose of the many rules, what it is like to live within these structures, and some ways that this shows up in daily life in Kyoto. An example is attention. Attention to detail is one of the beauties of Kyoto. This is an example of the magic of the traditional structures of Kyoto. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Reggie. So much of what you said reminds me of what Rebecca was saying earlier. You have a lot of connections here. The next piece in the book is by Lauren Walker, and it's titled December. It took first prize in the 2020 Writers in Kyoto writing competition.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I don't have that much to say either, but I just want to start by saying it is such an honor to be included in this really brilliant book. I have so enjoyed reading it. So much thanks to Karen and Rebecca for getting this out to us and just including me in this really educational and inspiring project. I've learned a lot and just really enjoyed every single piece. So thanks so much. My poem was kind of an accident. I just happened to be reading about the Tanabata festival. And if you're familiar with the legend of, I always mispronounce this, but Orihime and Hikoboshi, who were lovers separated by the Milky Way and the stars, but also by her father, because they became a little bit truant in their jobs. But it just reminded me of a kind of autobiographical story that happened in my life with my current partner. And I just thought it'd be a nice tale, sort of like you guys were saying about the magic of Kyoto. And this long walk, if you've read the poem, is about a really long walk from the Kawaramachi, Maritamachi area of Kamogawa all the way to Ohara. And it's just a pleasure to have that kind of memorialized and just be a part of the book. So thanks again. And I look forward to reading more and hearing more from you all. So thanks.
Thanks, Lauren. So that was a great segue into the next piece. So that we have all of these connections here speaking of Ohara. So Edward J. Taylor's piece, Ohara After Scarlet Leaves. Over to you, Ted.
Thanks. Yeah, I felt I kind of squeaked in thematically under the radar with that one being not properly in Kyoto City, but close enough anyway. And I think, again, in our hearts, to follow on John's theme, as we all tend to think of Ohara as part of Kyoto anyway. But actually, my piece was from, it's sort of like a Zuihitsu sort of journal piece that I did back in 2008, in fact. And it was the first time I visited Jakoin after the fires, after the rebuilding, after the fires of the year 2000. I think a lot of us have probably been to Jakoin both before and after the fires. And yeah, again, not much more to say about it other than it's just sort of a ramble around town. And there was the first paragraph of the piece, the first section is actually from more of a recent trip, which was again a longer piece, but I felt that first introductory paragraph was the best part of it. So I tried to fit it in. It's not seamless, obviously, because there's two sections of that particular piece, but I found actually today in rereading prior to this talk that there is actually a theme of decay and a theme of impermanence there, which I think is very much part of Kyoto and the structures of Kyoto in particular. And those of us who have lived here for a number of years, or decades for that matter, have seen the many faces that Kyoto has taken over the years. And something that Felicity was mentioning earlier with Horikawa is that I think, if I can paraphrase kind of that, I think every visitor to Kyoto, no matter how many times they've come here, tends to see a different city each time because it is changing so quickly, for better or for worse. So that's all I really have to say about the piece. In keeping in that sense of impermanence, though, I think it's perfect that I was actually seeking out snow and wanting to see the town in the snow. So that was sort of an inadvertent ripoff of James Joyce, that metaphor of snow. That wasn't intentional. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it, and yeah, looking forward. Thanks everyone for putting together a great product and a great work.
Thanks, Dad. Next up in the book is Jan Williams, who also unfortunately cannot be here today. Also, it's been a while since the last absent contributor, but her piece is Beyond Zen, Kyoto's Gorinto Connections. And she did send a message, a very brief one. She just wanted to express her regards for everyone. Send my kind regards to everyone involved, is what she has to convey to us today. And then the next piece after that is my piece, Okuribi. It's the first prize winner of the 2019 Writers in Kyoto Writing Competition. And so, as you probably intuit from the title, it has to do with the Gozan Okuribi, the 5 bonfires on the hills surrounding the city at the end of Obon. That's the sort of grand send-off for the spirits back to the other world. So in Kyoto, on evenings of August 16th, I always sense this huge amount of noise and commotion and cacophony. It's in the air and the very atmosphere itself, as well as being echoed by the human activity that's going on below. And I like to picture the spirits sort of gathering in the air above the city after their last farewells to friends and loved ones, the ones still among the living, that is, and then sort of breaking off and swirling around near the tops of the hills, like practically visible, first in the form of the heat haze, the ever-present heat haze, and then later as the smoke from the fires. And then the air above this basin that is the city becomes this vast party, the sort of departure lobby, with a tremendous energy that is almost palpable. And the photo in the book, which is by Mark Thomas, thank you, Mark, for that contribution, it really captures this feeling. It's just such a perfect fit. There's smoke and there's haze, there's even clouds in the background, hinting at the unstable weather that we often have on that evening, and which is in my piece as well. So all of that is what I was hoping to capture in the piece. It's this kind of prosy poem with dialogue that itself is hazy, and the narrator pops back and forth in regards to both time and perspective. So all in all, it's a very non-standard kind of piece littered with all sorts of literary problems, but all that was done with this kind of this painterly intention. And so that's what it's about. And I had this scene in mind when I was writing this in 2019 BC, that is before COVID, back when the Dai of Daimonji had all its fires lit, as did Myoho and the Fune and the Hidari Daimonji and the Tori. And unlike the last couple of years, when Daimonji was represented by only 6 fires spread quite far apart, which seems, I must say, like a radical demonstration of social distancing. And all of the other figures are limited to only a single fire, very much like the announcements asking families to send only one person at a time into the store to buy groceries. And to me, the fires of the last 2 years they've seemed small and lonely and sad, although I think the intention of continuing to have the event is this show of perseverance, that we're going to honor this tradition that's important to us. We're not going to let this virus get the best of us, etc. But I have to say that I'm looking forward to the day when all of the fires are once again lit. So that's all I had to say. Thank you very much. And so who's next? Next up is Simon Rao with One Dog Day in Summer. Over to you, Simon.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, all right.
Yes.
I'm beaming in from soggy Himeji City. I hope it's a little drier where you are, and I'm slowly sweating my life away. But yeah, just like to say a little bit about the story I wrote. It's more or less a yarn. And before that, I haven't actually read many of the stories that feature in the book because I sent my copy to the guy who inspired One Dog Day in Summer, which is actually an old friend. And he contributed to a Kickstarter campaign that I ran for a collection of short stories last year. And because he was the top backer, the reward was like 4 copies of the book plus a tailor-made story inspired by his idea or her idea and a real life experience. So really this story is, it begins with his idea of 2 disgruntled Eikaiwa teachers robbing their school. And they plan to catch the night flight to Thailand, but on the way they hit Daimonji. And I just like to say at this point, Lisa, you really set the scene. And actually I was surprised to read another Daimonji story, but you've really created the atmosphere, which I can't convey. But like I said, the story it's just a yarn. And yeah, I hope you enjoy reading it. And that's all from Himeji. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Simon. I have to say that I did read your story and I had the exact same feeling of, wow, he captured what I was trying to capture so well with the atmosphere. So, otogai-sama. All right, next piece in the book is by Catherine Pawasarat, The Gion Festival, A Hero's Journey. Kata, over to you.
She just left, I think, right? It was in the
Yes.
I wasn't
on the
keeping up with.
chat. She had to leave.
Sorry
Yeah,
about
that's a
that.
shame.
I haven't been opening the chats just for fear that I would disrupt the recording. I don't know if that's true or not, but at any rate, oh, that's too bad. But she's got a lovely piece that is on the Writers in Kyoto website. Her introduction, there's a little video. It's easy to find, so we can hop over there to hear her talk about her piece. The next piece in the book is by John Einerson, who I understand is crossing the New Mexico desert at the moment and is not able to beam in with us. Following that is Robert Yellen. Robert's still here, right? A Kyoto ceramic dynasty, Kiyomizu Rokubei 8th generation.
Yes, hello everyone. It's so nice to see your faces, I have to say. I walked into a coffee shop the other day and I thought for sure it was Paul Cardy sitting there, but I didn't mean to ask because he had this mask on. So it's just nice to see everyone's faces here. And again, thanks for an amazing anthology. Karen and Rebecca, finally we got our emails straight and everything. Karen and I share the same middle name, so I feel a fondness for the Lees out there, somewhat of sake as well. Earlier on, Mark mentioned John Cage as someone who was inspired by Japanese culture. He also went to the Echizen pottery village long ago. So inspirations can be found many ways. And of course, the structures, as we all know, can be found in ceramics. The most famous one, obviously, is the Raku family, whose name is synonymous with tea bowls throughout the world and other misinformation about what they do. And they're in their 16th generation. But one family that I'm sure you've all seen designs of all around the shops, all around in cafes, is the famous Kiyomizu Rokubei family. And I thought that would be a great introduction to a structure of Kyoto and how the lineages and the structures have changed over the years and brought into contemporary life. So I have this piece right here, which is by the 8th generation. He's really taking it into a sculptural ceramic art mode. And something that was hinted in my article, and I hope that you take the family up on this, they have a private museum in the back Of course, the gallery is always open, but if you call them and ask, they'll take you into the back where you can see examples from the first generation all the way up to the current generation. And the son, whose name is Hiroaki, is the future 9th generation, doing some quite amazing work. So do go, it's on the map. I think it's number 20. Great idea to put that on the map, everyone. Call Mr. Kiyomizu. They do have a web page. And something that I put on Writers in Kyoto's Facebook page is some photos of what you can see there, because in my piece, I'm talking about, visual work, but there was no visuals. So I did put some photos of what's on in the shop on the writer's page. And of course, ceramics to me is life itself. I think everyone, we're sitting at our desks a lot. Sometimes we get a little irritated. You need something from nature. I have a little Momotaro ceramic piece. When I get kind of irritated, I just pick it up. The world seems right again. Have a nice me at your desk that you can hold up and kind of connect with what's real in life, not in front of the computer. It's just a great community that we're being a part of. And I thank John for starting this and for all the contributors. And I look forward to volume number 5. Lastly, nothing to do with Writers in Kyoto. I would like to plug my friend's ice cream in Matsumoto. So if you want to have the best ice cream in Japan, my friend who I met 35 years ago in Numazu, his name is Kelton Boyer. He makes the best ice cream in Japan. And while you're reading the anthology, there's probably no better dessert to kind of spoon feed yourself as you read the anthology and have some Mount Desert Island ice cream from Matsumoto. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. And speaking of ice cream, it's going to be a good time for that. All right, next up, Ken Rogers. How do you follow ice cream? You do it with Sanji-san Gendo, reinterpreted.
That's a tough segue. I was just going to pick up on what John said about Writers in Kyoto starting out sitting around a table. As one of those people who sat around that table, it is amazing to see this having just come so far, and to see things like this series of anthologies, the competition, just not as objects, but the community that has been created of the fellowship of mind is a wonderful thing. And the anthologies represent that rather beautifully. We get insights into everyone's different viewpoints and interpretations and so on. My interest in the piece that I did for this anthology came out of an interest in the structures that are basically imagined. I had just written a piece on the lost landmarks of Kyoto. I don't know if the connection is allowing to see that, but that was this was an article that I did in the Ma issue of Kyoto Journal, which picked up on Hokoji, which was the temple with the Kyoto's big Buddha, which went through 4 different incarnations and finally disappeared in 1976, I think. I have to check that. It was really recent. But having gotten interested in that, I was looking online and I found images from dealers from an interesting book. And if you can see this, this is the representation supposedly of the Daibutsu in Kyoto. And I realized that the person who made that image had never seen the actual Daibutsu. This over here, I hope you can see this time. Where am I? Yeah, okay, there. That is the only maquette of the original Daibutsu. So you can see there's a major difference in the representation. So this image had been created from written descriptions by Dutch merchants who were on their way from Dejima to Edo to see the shogun. And it turned out that there was another illustration that was also out there, which is this one, which, I don't know, is meant to be Sanju Sangendo. There is a major difference if you look at that figure from what you would see if you go to Sanju Sangendo. Okay, so this idea of people having not been in Kyoto, but imagining Kyoto was a really interesting thing. So that's what I wrote about, basically. So from landmarks that had existed and now exist only in the imagination to images that we created from the imagination. But the interior, for example, here, totally Western style. It's also the dress is Chinese. There are some sort of recognizable tropes that come through, but just amazing to see people fantasize Kyoto. And then to think that even today, people come to Kyoto with magnificent illusions and discover a different place from perhaps what they expected. We do have, I think most of you have already seen a blurb for this, but the next issue of Kyoto Journal is 100.
Oops, muted.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so our next Kyoto Journal, 100 Views of Kyoto, will be out in around September 10th. Check it out on our website if you haven't already seen it. I hate to say this, but it says 100 views, but the written text, there are only 86. But there are a lot of images, so you do get your money's worth. Just saying, just full disclosure, in case anyone says 86 views, it's supposed to be 100. There's a long tradition, 100 views of this, 100 views of that. The old Buddhist tradition of 10,000 things for the reality of the world. So who's counting? Thank you. A special thanks to Karen and Rebecca, and again to John for setting all this up and making all this happen over so many years. Yoroshiku onegaishimasu.
Thanks, Ken. That's really interesting in light of the earlier conversation. This request from John, buy copies, send them out, send them all your friends. So we're sending Kyoto out to people who have perhaps never been here, and they're going to make their own images in their mind, have their own imagination about it. All right, so next up is Marianne Kimura with Yurei Ame, Ghost Candy. And this one took the third prize in the 2019 Writers in Kyoto Writing Competition.
Hello. So I was going to try to get a picture of this place. It's a real shop, and my husband and I, whenever he comes to Kyoto, he lives in the Kanto area. We always go around everywhere, temples or locations, and we went to Keninji. And behind Keninji, there's this little shop, and I don't know, it says Minatoya Yurei Kosodate Ame, right? So it's like what raised candy for raising children. And usually, you don't think of candy that's good for raising children. And it had this word yurei. So I think, I forgot, either he looked it up or we read a plaque there, but it was a famous shop that had a legend attached to it about a ghost who actually came into the shop and bought some candy for about a week. And they didn't know she was a ghost. She looked like a person, maybe a bit spooky. This was, I think, an Edo Jidai, or maybe even earlier than that. I don't remember exactly when, but so I was and then her legend, the legend was that she never came back, but a baby was found at a grave, a newborn baby. So the speculation was that actually she had given birth while she was perhaps dying, and then her ghost had gone to the shop to get the candy and fed this newborn baby the candy, which is, I don't know, I mean, it's a remarkable story, and my imagination was captured. I mean, I have two children. I was trying to like put it together in my mind. How would people, give candy to a newborn baby? But I suppose it was possible. I don't know. But in any case, whether this is true or whether this is just a legend, but I felt like, well, this is remarkable. I could try to put this as a story. So that's how it came about. And I found it, and then oh, here it is. Can you see the picture? That's Minatoya Yurei Kosodate Amide. They're still in business. I don't know, 300, 400 years. You know how there are shops here that are 1,000 years old. And I love, that's my hobby, to visit these places. So thank you for listening. That's all I have.
Thank you, Marianne. That is an amazing story. So the next piece in the book is the last piece. It's The Afterword by Alex Kerr. It's a new philosophy of tourism. Over to you, Alex.
Unmute.
Mute. Okay. Yeah. First, I want to congratulate our editors, John, everybody involved, the illustrators, John Anderson, the photographers, everyone involved. What an extraordinary achievement. I mean, it's so professional. In fact, I actually looked at the back and I thought, what publisher did they get to put this together so well? And I realized that you've done this yourselves. So it's really impressive. One thing I wanted to mention, there's a wonderful scene in Proust where he wakes up in the morning and the newspaper has just arrived, and he finds an article and he's shocked to realize that he's been plagiarized. Somebody has written his article, his own writing, word for word practically. And then he realized, oh, wait a minute, this is my article, the one that I wrote some months ago and forgot about, and it's just come out today. And so then he stops and he goes all the way back to the beginning and starts reading it again. But this time he imagines his friend so-and-so reading it, or the editor of a certain publisher reading it. And then he goes back and reads it again and kind of imagines himself as everybody in Paris reading it, you know. And so that kind of happened to me this time. I got the book and I read a couple of other things, and I turned to mine and I read it and I thought, it doesn't fit in. Everyone else here is talking about structures and aesthetics and history, and of course the things that we love about Kyoto, and I don't really. I've written a rather journalistic piece that's kind of doesn't quite fit the mood perhaps, but it's been what's on my mind, and it has to do with tourism. And we're in a weird period, of course, with COVID. But I had written a book called Destroying the Nation with Tourism, which came out in 2019. And it's a riff on Kanko Rikkoku, building up the nation with tourism, which has been the theme of the national push to make Japan into a tourist nation. And of course, I called mine Kanko Bokoku, instead of raising up the nation, destroying the nation. And what I'm talking about, of course, is this huge ingress of millions of people into Kyoto that really did transform the city. Of course, right now, the inbound tourists are pretty much zero. But there will be a rebound when we finally emerge from this. The pent-up desire to visit Kyoto is enormous. And so they'll all be back. And so, but in that Destroying the Nation with Tourism book, it's not an anti-tourism book. Let me say that at the outset. Kyoto needs tourists, Japan needs tourists. It has many beneficial aspects, not only the money that comes in, but the international cultural impetus many of the macchia that were preserved in Kyoto that were done because the international tourists were coming. When it was only domestic tourism, none of that happened. So there's benefits, and I'm not some kind of anti-tourist person. But what I am trying to say is that depending on how it's managed or not managed, tourism also can produce toxic side effects. And these are management issues. Just as toxic discharges in industry, that's management, whether you install the protocols and the programs within your factory, that prevent those dangerous discharges. It can be done, right, technologically. The same thing can happen. There's a technology of tourism. And sadly, Japan, because this is very new for Japan, has been really unprepared, and it's been chaos. And I'm not just blaming Japan. The whole world is reeling from the tourist onslaught that really picked up steam. Japan, Venice and Barcelona, all the way up to the top of Mount Everest. Galapagos, the world is having to deal with this. And so in that little piece, I talked first about, I divided it into two parts, and what I call they and we. And that's not some kind of opposition or us and them. They or them are the people that manage museums, city planning, temples, shrines, and so on. There are ways to mitigate it, which you can do with reservation systems, which you can do with access control, all of these things which are talked about in great detail in Kanko Bokoku, which unfortunately is only in Japanese at this point. But that book is really a kind of primer of techniques, how you can turn tourism around and make it beneficial, using, for example, a reservation system or limits on crowds and so on. The second part, though, which is the part was not in Kanko Bokoku, but I really got to thinking about during COVID, is us, which is to say, all of my life, and I've constantly traveled since I was very young, and I went back and forth between Japan and Thailand 6-7 times a year, and once in Thailand, I was going to Burma and Indonesia, and all over Southeast Asia, and then to China, and then of course back to the States once, twice a year, and all over, anytime I wanted to, or in Europe when I could, anytime I wanted to travel anywhere, I went without giving it a second minute's thought. Now that's different. With COVID, with 2 weeks of quarantine on one side and 2 weeks of quarantine on the other, and the PCR tests, and just the sheer discomfort and danger of riding the airplanes and all the rest of it, we are not, for a while yet, going to easily travel just anywhere, anytime. And so that means we have to choose. I can't just go and pick up and go to Europe, oh, I think I'll go to Europe next month, and then next time I'll go to Hawaii. No, it's like I can maybe travel one place a year this year. Where would that be? And the same even applies within Japan. Certainly this year, I've been to Tokyo exactly once, and I've been to Iya Valley, which I would have constantly gone to, 0. Because not only is it a danger for me, but in Iya, it's a danger for the locals, for me to go. So you have to now and start choosing, where should you go? And so that's where one's own responsibility towards travel comes in. And I describe it as, who needs me? It used to be, where could I go that would just be fun? Now you can ask yourself, if I go to Tokyo, will it make any difference whatsoever to Tokyo? But if I go to Iya, or I go to Ojika, or I go to even within Kyoto, not to the famous rich temple that everyone's going to go to anyway, but the little poor place that's out of the way that maybe I could contribute or benefit, wouldn't that be different? They need me. And so that's one of the questions, not the only one, that one can ask in this, what I'm calling my new philosophy of tourism. Right now, all of this seems kind of pointless because we have no tourists, and people are feeling, oh, well, the over-tourism, that problem's over. But no, it's not over. And we're going to have a tsunami of tourism once COVID settles down. And so now's the time to be thinking about it because Kyoto's future is very much bound up with this issue. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations to everyone involved in this big achievement. And I just look forward to the next volume.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for those thought-provoking ideas. That concludes our presentations by the contributors. And so now we can all maybe relax a little bit, turn on your mics again. Let's have a big round of applause for everybody. Let me just go to gallery view and put everyone's face up. Okay. Gallery view for the recording, that is. Congratulations, everyone. Good work. All right, time for questions. Discussion, questions. I think we can probably just, jump in and do this free form. If you'd like to type a question into the chat, you can do that. Christy, I see your hand.
Yes.
You can type things into the chat. You can raise your physical hand, your virtual hand, and you guys can help me look out for physical hands raised that maybe I can't see. So Christy, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Alex Kerr actually about what you're just speaking about. I was wondering how keen Kyoto city government in particular to place those limits on tourism.
Well, one of the things I talked about in the book is this knotty question of limits, right? And a lot of people, city managers especially, have this very kind of deeply ingrained attitude that everything should be available. Everything should be available to everybody all the time. And even I think cultural people, I've had discussions with people involved in culture in Kyoto, and wouldn't it be unfair if not everybody could go? Or what about the poor student that shows up in Kyoto and might not get in? These are knotty, these are difficult issues, right? The fact is we've crossed the line. Not everybody can go to that show in the museum unless it's a nightmare for all, right? Not everybody can go to that temple unless, again, the very context and significance and meaning and spiritual value of that temple is lost. And so there will have to be limits, and they're already starting to set in. And then the question comes of how do you do it, right? And so there are reservation systems. There are all kinds of ways that it can happen. Raising the entry fees, just limits where you've reached a certain limit on that day and okay, no more. There are all kinds of things. And of course, it can be done with, it doesn't have to be done as one block sort of refusal. You can say, okay, or change, you can say 5,000 yen for everybody except students to get in for 1,000 or whatever it might be. Or there's a block of spaces just for students. Those are reservation systems. One of the biggest issues, yeah? Yes? Mark?
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to interject, but I was just thinking, how outside pressure often influences Japan in the past. But, even 20 years ago, when I went to fulfill a childhood dream of going to the Alhambra in Spain to Granada, it was a timed entrance. It was, if I wanted to go to the Courtyard of the Lions at the Alhambra, well, then I could only enter between this time and this time. And that was already more than 20 years ago. So I'm wondering why Japan, who's often very sensitive to, external influence from cultural forces such as Europe, for example, why they wouldn't be wanting to sort of like follow on with something that's already quite established.
Well, that's a very good point. And it's true. If you go to the Borghese Museum in Rome, it's all advanced reservation on the internet. You arrive and it's so pleasant because you have the place, quietly, you can walk around. All of that has happened in the rest of the world, but not here. I think there are two issues. One is it's just too new in Japan. The tourist boom has been happening everywhere. Europe's more used to it. You know, Japan 20 years ago, when I wrote Dogs and Demons, my chapter on tourism talked about how Japan had fallen off the tourist map. At that point, it was number 32 in the world, behind Croatia, you know, Tunisia. They were ahead of Japan. So this is brand new and nobody's used to it, right? So it kind of, and remember, Japan's specialty is, sadly, inflexibility, you know, for bureaucrats to suddenly say, okay, now we're going to change everything and have a new system. I mean, you know, just try to imagine that scenario. Then the second thing is, where's the big pressure coming from? Foreign pressure. It's not Europe or America, it's China. And the Chinese are pressing for advanced systems of tourism control? No. So, I mean, that's, I think, the quick answer to that. There's one other issue in answer to your question. Sorry, your name doesn't show up on the,
Christy.
Christy, yeah, excuse me. Another issue which has to do with access. You know, hundreds of European cities have removed automobiles from their old downtown centers. Even New York, you know, Broadway, something like 10 blocks of Broadway now are car free. I mean, this is becoming standard in many parts of the world. It's that making a street car free will actually benefit the street. They found that tourist purchases and use of the shops and restaurants goes up when they walk instead of driving. But here we're still stuck in this idea that, you know, bendy, right? It has to be more available. They've one of the things that happened, as I mentioned in my little piece, rather than putting the parking lot right at the place at Stonehenge, they removed it by 2 kilometers. What that does is it makes people walk. And secondly, when they do get to Stonehenge, it's not surrounded by cars and parking lots and shops and the rest of it. You're in the middle of fields with sheep and you feel you've gone back, you know, 10,000 years. All of these are technologies that Japan has not really mastered. And sorry, getting back to Kyoto, what's happening? Kyoto was moving in the direction of thinking about these systems. And then the tragedy was that COVID happened. Tourism vanished overnight. And now what we have, sadly, is desperation. Whatever it takes, let's get the numbers back. We're hungry, we need them. All thought of management and trying to make it less crowded or whatever, right at this point anyway, is out the window as far as I can see. So unfortunately, and not just Kyoto. Yes? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This actually would seem like a prime time to make those plans when it's not so busy. You know, if anyone
Now's
has
the chance, yeah,
capacity to not be worrying about how to deal with COVID itself. Yeah, now's a good time to do that.
Lisa, I'd like to point out that there was a question on the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Will the anthology be available at Apple Books, he says.
So is anyone prepared to answer that question? I did see that question, but I do not have the answer.
Rick might be able to answer it, but he unfortunately had to leave. Why don't we say that we can possibly answer that question on the website, or later on after we've done some research might be a good idea.
Okay, I'll keep looking.
Thank you.
You don't necessarily have to have a question. Oh, Kirsty's hand's up again. But anybody wants to say anything at all, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. If anyone else does want to ask a question, I will stop. But I was really curious about the photos and the illustrations, because when I saw the cover on the website, I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I thought it was a photo, and I thought, oh, where's that, Tori? You know, and I was really fascinated by the kaonashi in the front. I know it's someone bowing, but just like, that's kaonashi from the Ghibli story. But anyway, so when I actually got it and saw it was an illustration, I really love it that much more to have that. I guess it's a different way of writing. It's that handcraft appeal was really nice. And then I tested my daughters on this. On page 138 and 139, it's John Enarson's photo essay. And I know he's a photographer. So it was like, of course, they're photos, but I tested my daughters. I said to them, are these two pictures, are they photos or are they drawings? And they saw the one on page 139 and said, that's a photo. And they saw the one on page 138 and they said, that's a drawing. And I wondered if there'd been, how that worked out. Like, was there some kind of, or maybe it was John who did some masterful work on that, or maybe it was some factor of the printing, because in other places I've kind of like, I guess that's a photo, but.
I would say that probably John, it looks to me as though I'm not much of an expert, but it looks like a very grainy sort of paper that he used. And only sorry that John isn't here to, yes, go ahead. Ken?
Right,
Who was
that's
saying
not
that? Mark?
rain, those are snowflakes. That's the middle of a snowstorm.
Yes, indeed.
It must have been a slow shutter.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah,
I think so, when you can see the sort of the trail of the snowflakes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I don't think, well, John does all kinds of magic with his pictures, but you have to ask him directly, I think.
Thank you.
About timed entrances, I'm going to circle back to
Stonehenge?
The most famous garden, you always had to be there at 8 o'clock, well before the buses arrived. One time I was heading there and I passed a guy pushing a wheelchair, and when he got to the steps, he pulled his mother out of the wheelchair, threw her over his shoulder, and went on into the temple, propped her on a pillar, and they contemplated the 15 or 14 stones, and the gravel and the moss. I don't think they were counting the stones. This was an elderly woman. It obviously meant so much to be there, and it would not have been the same if it had been crowded with high school students or tourists snapping photos. I really treasure that moment as a memory of that garden. So you have to be there early to catch things like that. That's all I'm saying.
Everybody, I'm going to have to sign off now, but it's a great Zoom and great to be talking with everyone, and we'll just carry on from here.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So Marianne, you know, when you were talking about the Yurei-ame, I've heard this story before, and I've also thought it odd, you know, this I pictured hard candy, so that's why
it is hard candy. They sell it there, and it looks like amber. It looks like an amber necklace. It looks like, and it's in little pieces. And yes, you can buy. I think we did buy some actually. It's quite good. It's barley.
Yeah, mukicha.
Yeah, it's kind
Candy,
of
right?
like that color. Yeah. You
I've
can
got
go
a
there. It's behind Keninji. Do you know Keninji? If you go to
Mm.
that temple and you just go and then the side streets behind there, you can easily find it. You can find it online, so you can find the map and everything. It's really easy to get to. Recommend it.
Question from Mike Freiling.
Oh, hey, can you wait just a second? I wasn't finished with the candy thing. So this particular store, they've, I guess, I don't know. I think the story is really old. It's in some really old tales.
Right.
And maybe it's told in more places than that. But as you were talking, I remembered somewhere there's some piece of old literature now that I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it talks about the whatever ame, and it's like fruit gels and liquids and drinks. And I wonder if the original story with the yurei ame wasn't maybe intending something like that, if it's not hard candy like we think of today. Even though this story, this shop, Simon, thank you that Lafcadio Hearn has told it, and it's been retold somewhere else. Who's the guy that does all the Japanese folk tales? The not Lafcadio Hearn, but I can't remember.
If I was going to feed a hard candy to a child, I would melt it.
Yeah,
give it to them in hot water or something.
That's what I think she was. I think that's what the ghost was saying. That my picture was that she was like rubbing the lips of the baby, so that he could get the sugar in. And if indeed it's true, that she was using the moisture, maybe of her own mouth as well, to get the baby to have the sugar, so that I think it was a boy, I'm not sure though, but could survive for those few days until they could find him. So, I mean, it's really an amazing story, and really,
I think it's an amazing piece of advertising. I think the store has co-opted. I think it's like eels in summer. I think the store co-opted this fable that's been around for even longer and adapted it. But that's just my conjecture.
So Miriam, when you say behind Keninji, you mean on the northern side?
Go to Keninji and then go around. Actually, it's more like behind Keninji and then kind of go left. And
so on the northern side of Keninji?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but not directly abutting it. So it's like a little bit on a side street around there. You just wander around, you'll definitely find it. Okay. You can, and you can use Google Maps. So it's
okay.
So John, I'll cede the floor to you now.
Mike, you translated some of the Heian period poems, or I gather.
Yeah.
And have you seen a publication that came out last year called Kyoto, a Literary Guide?
I've seen it. I haven't opened it or read it. Or
quite a few of the poems are the same. So it seems synchronicity that while you were working on translating, I and my group, there were 6 of us, we were working on translating the very same poems without knowing of each other. Now, I haven't compared yet because I haven't got my books here. I'm in Hokkaido. But when I get back to Kyoto, I shall do a comparison of your translation and our translation.
Okay, well, like I said, first of all, congratulations, you just sold a copy of that book, because I'll have to pick it up to take a look at it. Secondly, like I said, I should to manage your expectations. The first draft of all those poems was that I actually did all 100 of them back in 1978. It was kind of like I just finished my PhD a year before, and this is my idea of how to relax and learn Japanese and write, translate those poems. But a lot of them are full of misconceptions, and some of them really aren't that good anymore. So we're reworking them now. But I would love to read. How many of them are there in your book?
Oh, I've never counted.
Oh, okay, quite a few then.
We had Peter Miller. Do you know Peter Miller? He published a translation of Hyakunin Ishu about a few years ago. It got a lot of attention because he's very well connected.
Is that the big thick one that's called Pictures of the Heart?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
John, did you mean Macmillan? Peter Macmillan?
Peter is not Macmillan. It's Miller, I think, isn't it? Muck. Is it Macmillan?
Well, if you find it, if you could send me the link, I'd love to take a look at it.
Okay, I'll send you the links. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
I think we can wrap up, can't we, Lisa? My stomach is telling me it's time to.
I think so.
Time to go and get some of that ice cream. I'm in Hokkaido. I'm wondering if Robert's ice cream is more delicious than Hokkaido ice cream, because it's absolutely stunningly delicious here.
Yeah, that's a tough challenge. All right, thanks everyone. It's
Great,
been-
well done,
it's been
Rebecca.
magical.
Karen, you
Thank
pulled
you,
it off.
Kate.
You really did a great job. It's absolutely fantastic. Really, really pleased. So
Yeah,
many.
thanks a lot, Rebecca. You did an
Thank you.
amazing job.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing number 5, whoever is going to take that
Yeah,
on.
me too.
Oh, you're not
Go.
coming up for it. You're not coming up for a second one?
No. One's enough.
Yeah.
Give someone else a chance.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Goodbye,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you for
Bye.
coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.